Around this time every year, I like to give out our top 12 college football programs. Now, when we've looked at this over the last few weeks, I've told you several times how I define a program. Some people like to go all time. I don't really care what you did in 1937, at least as it relates to judging you in the here and now. But when we measure a program, what I'm looking at is like a rolling 4-year blend, and I care about how good you are at acquiring talent. I care about how much you're winning on the field. I care about how deep your resource pool is. How stable is your program? When you get the talent, how good are you at developing that talent? And so I'm looking around the country and I thought, at least for the time being, we have 12 teams in the college football playoff. So instead of doing a top 5 or a top 10, let's go top 12. But that's not fun enough. We could just do a normal countdown. I could tell Colin go from 12 to 1. I could tell Colin go from 1 to 12. How about this? Because all of you have your own list. So I'm going to look over here at the live chat. Just give me some teams that you think would be in the top 12 of college football program rankings over the last several years. I'll tell you where I have them. Like there's one immediate. So Alabama's in there immediately. I got Alabama at number 5 in the program rankings right now. They're only down at 5 because of the roster churn, which was directly related to the coaching churn. So you cannot have had Nick Saban as your head coach and then lose him and not have it disproportionately impact your overall standing as a program. Because one of the things that we measure is program stability. Now, having said that, boy, that's like a first world problem because they've still got 2 SEC titles and 2 playoff trips over the past 4 years. They've still got a really, really good talent roster. They are tied for being the number 1 recruiter in the SEC over the past 4 years with Georgia. They just had their first non-double-digit win season in quite a while last year, and that was a 9-win season. So this isn't predictive. I'm not talking about where I think Alabama's going under Kalen DeBoer. This is the here and now. I would put them at number 5 in the overall program rankings. And again, that's not looking at the previous 3 years the same as I would if Saban was there. If Saban was still there and they just gone 9-4, they'd probably still be the number 1 program in the country, or 2 at worst, just because of how much I value the past 4 years as opposed to the most recent year. That's the difference in a program and a team. Ohio State on there. Okay, so Ohio State, it's a good time to get to them. I've got Ohio State at number 2. I'm going to put these over here if you don't mind so I can see them. I've got Ohio State at number 2 in the program rankings right now. They've got 4 straight 11-win seasons. Of course, they just won the national championship. Where you have to knock them ever so slightly is they don't have conference championships mixed in there because they couldn't get there because they keep getting beat by Michigan. That's factored in here. That's why they're not the number 1 overall program. They've been the best recruiter in the Big Ten over the past 4 years, elite program and organizational structure, so they've got everything else. The big knock on Ohio State has been, well, you keep losing to Michigan. Michigan would be ahead of Ohio State, except that there's been a little churn there, kind of like there has been at the top with Alabama. We talked about this when I did the Big Ten program rankings. That's what barely edged Ohio State, because this is not teams. So this is not just we're going to value head-to-head and that's it. We're talking about the standing of your program. And the other hard thing about that is sometimes you've got one program that's had success against another one. Michigan's had success recently against Ohio State. But I'm not just judging you against them. I'm judging you against the totality of the sport. I'll get to Michigan in a little while. We already hashed this out, I think, last Thursday, Jesse. Didn't we do it last Thursday? So I got Ohio State there at number 2. Notre Dame, who just played Ohio State in the national championship game. Where'd I have Notre Dame? Okay, I've got them down at 7. Again, down at 7, relatively speaking. Notre Dame is 44-11 the last 4 years. They've gone 11 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, 14 wins. Okay, so they're getting it done on the field very clearly. They've got 4 straight top 12 recruiting classes. So they've done a great job, they've done a very, very good job, just below great, of getting really good talent in there. But think about the development. Think about the overall organizational buy-in, the structure, the culture, all the things that have to do with talent once you acquire it. They're A+ in all of those categories. They feel closer to being Tier 1 now than they have in the last several years to me. You've got one of the brightest young head coaching names leading your program, and Marcus Freeman. Now, here's what's happening up there. Again, this is not baked into this ranking, but for futuristic purposes, or perpi, the plural of purpose, as we've established on this show, they're starting to have some of their big names get plucked. Lose a general manager here, lose a defensive coordinator there. Okay, that's a consequence of success. You will never win at this level without losing guys because everyone wants what you have. So the NFL, Cincinnati Bengals wanted what you had. USC wanted what you had. Okay, so now we find out organizationally how strong is it moving forward. But as for the here and now, I got Notre Dame at number 7. There's Georgia. So someone said Georgia. Let me cut in really quick and ask, look, prayer hands, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you think you're subscribed, check and make sure. Over 50% of you aren't. It's free, it doesn't sign you up for anything, and it helps us keep the show free, college football year-round, the way God intended it. All right, back to the clip. That's my number 1 program. Georgia's been the number 1 program in the country. Georgia is the number 1 program in college football right now to me. You're looking at the last 4 years. You got 2 national championships baked in there. Clearly no one else has done that. A couple of conference titles. They just won the SEC this past year in what most Georgia fans would consider a down year. I consider Georgia having been a little bit down this past year, which is how you know you're really, really rolling as a program. It's like someone asks, how'd you do this year? Dude, we sucked. I mean, we won the SEC, but we were off a little bit. We just didn't have our fastball this year. It's an elite talent acquisition program. They're right there at the top with Alabama over the past 4 years as being the top recruiter in the conference. Their staff has been very strong organizationally. People continue to try and pluck from them because they've been the model organization, sort of the standard bearer along with Alabama in the conference and in college football over the past several years. So I got Georgia as the number 1 program in college football. I just saw Clemson in the live chat. Colin, where do I have Clemson? They're in here. I've got Clemson at number 11 in the top 12 college football program rankings over the past 4 years. They've won 2 of the last 3 ACC titles, okay? There's been a lot of talk about them slipping. Well, they have slipped. It's accurate. They've slipped down to 11. They're not out of the top 12. There aren't 12 programs better than them in college football over the past 4 years. They've averaged a 10-win season. You're going to push back on that. My guess, knowing our audience, is I'm going to look at the comment section and someone's going to push back and say, yeah, they've done it in the ACC. I get that. I've accounted for that. That's why I don't have them top 10. Got them down there at number 11. They've been very good at acquiring talent. I use those words very purposefully. They've been very good. They have not been great. They have not been elite. The last 3 classes have finished outside the top 10. Clemson does not take a ton of kids because they don't lose a ton of kids. So it knocks them down a little bit, and it makes the final recruiting ranking look a little bit different than what it really is. Having said that, they've still been off the pace that they were on several years ago. But not bad, just not elite. Their on-field results, not bad, just not elite. Their staff has not been bad. It has not been elite. Now, as for the latter, I will say I think Dabo Swinney's taken some big steps with Garrett Riley a couple of cycles ago, and now hiring on the defensive side. Organizationally, they brought some guys in. I think he's taken steps there. I've got Clemson at number 11. A lot of this is not predictive. So this is a reflection of the last 4 years. Someone asked about, in fact, 5 people asked about Michigan, I see. Let's see. So Michigan Manifesto, I assume that's your first and last name in the live chat. You predicted Michigan's going to be number 6. Does anyone else out there think I have Michigan lower than number 6? Mind you, what we're talking about here, how we define program. Yeah, I got Michigan as the number 3 program in college football over the past 4 years. And they're only down that low due to the churn of losing Jim Harbaugh and losing a lot of that staff and having to retool. That counts. That matters. You kind of get knocked a little bit, just like Alabama has, losing Nick Saban in the program rankings because of that. So I've factored that in. What you can't ignore is this team has the highest winning percentage in the Big Ten over the past 4 seasons. Supreme culture, supreme development. I will get pushback on that because of the NCAA cloud and the Connor Stallions thing, but I don't know how that's going to turn out, nor do you. So I'm not even factoring that in here. If there's something to that, if there's a lot to that, we'll find out, and we can circle back. We can revisit this in the summer. I assume we'll know by then. But in the meantime, you got 3 Big Ten championships and a national championship there. You've got in the down year they just had, wins over Ohio State and Alabama to end the year. So Michigan's been really good. I can't knock them down too far. They're at number 3, and they lost a Hall of Fame head coach in the process. So in a lot of ways, these rankings are credits to Alabama and Michigan for being, what I have, Bama number 5. I got Michigan number 3. You lose Saban, you lose Harbaugh, you stay number 5, number 3 respectively. You're doing something right there. That's not predictive. I said that 3 times now. This is not predictive. If Sharon Moore crashes and burns at Michigan, if it's not even reaching another double-digit win season, well, okay, the future rankings will reflect that, but I don't know the future. It sucks. I wish I did. But not even the model knows where they're headed. Okay, someone asked about Oregon over there. Got Oregon at number 6 in the program rankings. They've got 4 straight double-digit win seasons. Some of that was in the Pac-12. Rest in peace. And recently, that's in the Big Ten. They just won the Big Ten championship. Elite talent acquisition program. They really, really aggressively go after guys in the portal and get them, and they're difference makers. You go back and watch that Ohio State win from earlier this year, and look at the guys making plays. Dylan Gabriel's the one throwing the ball. Evan Stewart's the one catching the ball. So they've been really good at that, but also they've got deep resources, which for some odd reason is used pejoratively against them. Like, everyone knows what wins in college football, and it is money. It's just a little bit more in your face now. And then Oregon goes and acquires talent, and they win on the field, and for some reason, the more insecure corners of the internet say, well, yeah, but they've got Nike. You're selling their program for them when you do that. Lanning's got to sit up there and smile. If he's secure in himself, which I assume he is, I would think Dan Lanning just sits back, puts his hands behind his head and smiles and says, keep trashing us. If the worst you can do against us is saying, well, Oregon's got Nike. The Nike wins are in Oregon sales. They look back and they say, yep. Is every high school kid listening to the haters out there? Yep, sure is. So that's part of what makes them as a program. How am I going to knock that? Also, I have this bold theory that a lot of you complain about that because you wish your program had that. I can't do anything to change it. We don't have that at Pate State. We got here, as Mary Chapin Carpenter would say, the hard way. But Oregon, look, think about the disadvantages that Oregon should have. It is a program tucked away in the Pacific Northwest where you have to travel 1,000 miles for the best 4-star, usually, and you're trying to compete against a team in Southern California, a bunch of teams in the Midwest, close to major population centers, and a bunch of teams in Texas and the South. So for all the disadvantage that Oregon should have, for all of the way the tables of the sport should be tilted against them, when I put the Nike bowling ball on the table, I don't look at it as tipping it way in their favor. I look at it as more balancing the table back out, maybe a slight tilt in Oregon's favor. They still have a lot that they have to work against. You know, that's the way I've always viewed Oregon. I think the sport may have changed a little bit, where it's come to them a little bit, but they're as aggressive as any organization and any staff in the country at taking advantage of that too. So Oregon at number 6. Texas, yeah, okay. We have not thrown Texas in here yet. I got Texas at number 4 in the overall college football program rankings right now. 25 wins the last 2 seasons. Now the difference with Texas is if you go back over 4 years, there's a losing season baked in there because Sark had just gotten there. But my thinking with this is I'll disproportionately weight the most recent thing I've seen because Steve Sarkisian is, the one responsible for it, and he's going to be there. Just like with Alabama or Michigan, I may knock you a little bit because a vast majority of the 4-year sample size was due to a head coach that's no longer there, if that makes any sense. They're stacking talent. They've got 4 top 6 classes in a row. If you'll notice, this is futuristic, but if you'll notice the names they keep adding there organizationally, top notch. They're loaded, but yet they haven't won anything. And so they keep loading up. Oregon's the same way. There's no national championship in the recent history. Ohio State, until 5 minutes ago, was that way. It's like they'd rank really high on these lists, but you do have the guy on the street corner of college football who's going to look at him and say, yeah, but what have they won? This is the guy who thinks if you haven't won a national championship, you haven't won anything. I don't necessarily traffic in that kind of thought, but some people do. And they're very loud. They're very vocal. So Texas knows that. Oregon knows that. Ohio State knew that. And so there's this different hunger and energy and kind of even a starvation, not just hunger, a starvation for tasting what Georgia has tasted, Alabama's tasted, Ohio State now just tasted it, Michigan tasted it recently. I believe in Texas, man. They're as high as you can be without having won any of the conference or playoff hardware that these other teams have won ahead of them. Now, someone said Ole Miss. I do have Ole Miss in here. I've got Ole Miss as number 12 in the college football program rankings over the last 4 years because 3 of those years they've got 10-plus win seasons in there. Kiffin, do you know how long he's been there? How long do you feel like Lane Kiffin's been at Ole Miss? Because he's been there over half a decade now. He's entering year 6. And after the first year, they've been flying pretty high. It's a high-level talent acquisition program, but it's not an elite recruiting program. They've done the thing a little bit more with the portal than with recruiting. They've just been really good at it, and they've finished inside the playoff committee top 14 3 of the last 4 years. So they've been right there at the end. I think they had a huge missed opportunity this past year. Huge missed opportunity. That team had no business missing the playoff this past year. And as we'll show you later in the show, they have no business missing the playoff this upcoming year. Time will tell. We'll see. Penn State. Okay, someone said, where's Penn State? Penn State's number 9. I got Penn State. James Franklin there is the number 9 program in college football over the last 4 years. It's just a lot of really good. I'm looking, so I've got Penn State's resume in front of me, how I would describe Penn State. There's a whole lot of really, really good. They've got 3 double-digit win seasons in the past 4 years. That's really, really good. They've got 4 top 15 classes. Really, really good. Their staff strength has, to me, continued to kind of improve. It's been really, really, really good. At no point would you have called any of these Penn State teams elite. None of their staffs I would have called elite, like top 5 in the country. I wouldn't have called any of these recruiting classes elite. Whatever one notch is below that, that's where Penn State's been virtually across the board. Organizationally, I think there's probably a little more tangible buy-in up there or maybe more commitment up there behind the scenes than there may have been 4 years ago. Scratch that. There's no doubt about that. James Franklin and everyone would attest to that. Now, they got more yeses than they were getting 4 years ago. So they're right there at number 9. The only thing they haven't had is that classic big win. Hadn't beaten Ohio State, the win over Michigan, the win that you could have gotten over Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. They were one step away from playing for the national championship this past year. Now, the detractor amongst us would look at it and say, yeah, but how was it any different than seasons prior? And then, the pro-Penn Stater would say, what do you mean? They were one step away from the national championship game. They made the playoff. Penn State hasn't been doing these things, and, on the surface, that's true. But then the detractor would come back in the room. He would say, yeah, semantically that's correct, but if you really think about it, they didn't do anything more than they've previously done. They didn't beat Ohio State. Ohio State just dropped the ball to where Penn State backed into the Big Ten championship game. Penn State didn't beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, so they didn't win the conference. And then Penn State got in the playoff and they beat SMU. Of course they did. They beat Boise. Of course they did. They've been beating those caliber teams. But when they finally went up against a Notre Dame, they didn't win that game. So they didn't beat anyone they weren't supposed to beat. So what did they do that they haven't been doing? It's a valid take on the thing. I think this past year's Penn State team was roughly the equivalent in quality of the previous couple of years. It's just inches here and inches there, and that's what has them top 10, but not top 5 as a program. There are so many rungs they could fall. There are a couple of more rungs they could climb. That's Penn State football right now. That's not a knock, that's a compliment. Tennessee, yeah, they're in here. Tennessee's at number 8. I just saw a couple of programs that aren't in here, but I will list the ones that are. So I got Tennessee at 8. 30 wins the last 3 seasons. Tennessee's back to mattering nationally. Not back to being elite. They're still a step away from that, just like Penn State. We were talking about them. They're a step away from that. Difference with Tennessee is they've got a couple of wins over the big boys. Like they've beaten Bama 2 of the last 3 times. That is Tennessee's Ohio State. They have been able to beat them 2 of the last 3 times. And that's a big deal because they had gone like 15 years without doing that. They've got 3 straight top 15 classes. Josh Heupel, clearly the answer there, which is wild because everyone will act like they knew that was coming. And everyone will act like they knew Danny White was the unicorn athletic director hire. People didn't know that. People didn't know that. When Heupel got hired there was talk around UCF that if he went one more year not getting it done, he may be on the hot seat there. No one tells that story the right way. Josh Heupel came there, and not only have they won, not only has he steadied and righted the ship, and it's gained some speed, but think about this past year. I was in Hot Springs, Arkansas last weekend for the Broyles Award ceremony, which goes to the top assistant coach in the country every year. And Tim Banks was there. So you hear that and you say, okay, a Tennessee coordinator was a Broyles Award finalist? That's not the wildest headline in the world. Well, that's not the way you should write the headline. The way you should write the headline was Josh Heupel's defensive coordinator was a finalist for the Broyles Award. That's a big deal. That's really transformational. That's when transformational things are starting to happen with your program, when the side of the ball that you don't specialize in starts to really catch up to the side you do specialize in. I am watching USC very closely to see if the same thing happens out there. Someone asked about Miami. No, I do not have Miami in here. Miami is on the outside looking in. Florida State on the outside looking in. Oklahoma's not in here. Do you see anyone else? A&M, yeah, A&M's not in here either. But LSU was just mentioned. LSU is in here. LSU is the number 10 program in college football right now, last 4 years. They got 29 wins the last 3 years. They had a lot of churn a couple of cycles ago. Brian Kelly, LSU in general, realized we are bad defensively. They had probably the worst defensive staff in the SEC. That's the bad news. The good news is they rectified it in a big way. They spared no expense. They just completely overhauled their defensive staff. They made the right moves. Unfortunately, they didn't do it quickly enough, and they wasted Jaden Daniels' Heisman season. And in no world did I ever think LSU would have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and not do anything of note in the postseason because defense held them back, but that's where they were. So that's baked into all this. But outside that, they got 2 double-digit win seasons in here. They won 9 games last year. They've got 4 top 12 classes. Brian Kelly is an established track record guy. And again, I'm not advocating for them to be top 5. Number 10, I think, is right where LSU should be pegged. So I think we just went 12 deep, Colin. So let's throw it up here. All right, this is, I'm going to tweet this out simultaneous to me repeating this on air. If you're listening to the podcast and it's like Monday morning where you are, I want you to, you may not even be able to hear this, but like 3, 2, 1, boom. When I just hit post, chaos will ensue. Because the people seeing that are seeing it during the live show, which means they're not watching the show, which means they probably missed the entire explainer. But here we are. Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Alabama. That's your top 5. Oregon, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Penn State, LSU. That's your next 5. And got Clemson and Ole Miss. Now, producer Jesse asked me, do you want to give the next 4 out? And I said, we are not the selection committee. We are not doing that. We went 12 deep, okay? Normally we would have gone like 5 or 10 deep. So if you couldn't make the top 12, keep trying. This will look different this time next year. And in the meantime, if I don't see you again, keep trucking.